the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A state of control.
This is A State of Control, episode 14, recorded Tuesday, October 21st, 2014. Who's going to touch it? This is State of Control, your monthly look at control and automation in the world of AV. My name is Tim Albright. I'm your host. With us, as always, Rich Fregosa from fregosadesign.com. Hello, sir.
Morning. Actually, I had a really weird lockup right as we started up, so I guess I've got to do like my quick robot jitter thing to catch up.
It is the week for that. Is the month for that.
It is a week of interesting technical anomalies.
Indeed.
So, celebrating, getting ready. Game 1.
For what?
So,
what game?
Some odd baseball game. They're having this weird fall baseball game.
You see, they stopped playing baseball in St. Louis thanks to you. I'm just want to point that out there. So.
There was much gnashing and wailing and gnashing of teeth from the sounds of it, from what I heard some of the reports.
Yeah, it was not. Long story short, if our manager's still around come spring, I'll be surprised. Although he does have a contract and silly things like that. So, all right, from the other side of the country, Mr. Steve Greenblatt from Control Concepts. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing well. It's funny.
Yeah.
My blog this week, I wrote about why we talk about sports so much on our shows. Steve and Richard are two guys that I still continue to talk about sports with. So whether it's the Giants football or the Giants baseball, we can talk about both Giants. Although Steve probably would rather not talk about the Giants football this year.
Not much to talk about here.
No. I'll still talk about the Bears. They stink, but I'll talk about them. So. All right, let's talk about some. Here's the thing: this month is going to be kind of interesting with State of Control. As luck would have it, last week I was very honored to be invited to an AVI Systems event, and I got to talk about control and automation with some end users and things of that nature, and it was good stuff, good reviews. So much so that I'm going to do the same thing in Detroit next month on the 12th of November. So if you're in Detroit, come check that out, and you can tell me how bad I suck. So, this month we're going to talk about some things that Infocom's doing and some other stuff that we're going to kick around first. First of all, Steve, we'll start with you on this one. Infocom has developed the idea, right, of the exceptional experience. We've talked about it before. We talked about it at Infocom and a couple other places. From our aspect and from the control and automation folks' aspect, how do we do that? How do we deliver an exceptional experience to the end user? Because honestly, that's who the people that are interfacing with the stuff that we do, right? With whether it's the touch panel or the mobile app or whatever. How do we deliver an exceptional experience to the folks using our stuff?
Well, I think it certainly starts, or the control system has a big part in it, and that question, from my perspective, it has to depend on who the user is and what their needs are and what the intention of the space is. It certainly is subjective, but the control system has a large part in it. And one thing that I will say is if a control system is not done right, it can certainly spoil an exceptional experience, and that's something also to think about. So you could lead with the control system and make that really guide a user, make them comfortable, make it so that they feel that the system is tailored to them. They don't really need to know what goes on behind the scenes. They don't need to know what the acoustics of the room are and what some of the physics of the visual angles are, but they do need to know about is what they're interacting with, and that typically is the control system, whether it's a touch panel or even if they're walking into a room and the system is automated for them. So the control system has a big part in it, but the answer does depend on who the user is and what their expectations are. And I think that we as control programmers take a lot of pride in trying to provide an exceptional experience.
All right, Rich. Then what? Depending on who the end user is. See if I can talk this morning. What goes into this? What goes into delivering this exceptional experience? Is it, conversations on the front and back end? I mean, what all goes into this process?
Well, I think that the first thing, and again, I from the programmer, software engineering development side, it's sometimes heresy when I say this, but make it pretty first. It's I think that it's it winds up getting pushed under the rug as that isn't conducive to the user experience, or it really shouldn't matter what it looks like, it's got to work first. And yes, absolutely, the underlying effort is going to be, look, it's got to work, it's got to work reliably, it's got to work quickly, and you don't want the UI to slow down the process, but I use the word, it's got to be palatable more than anything else. Again, if you go into a restaurant and somebody hands you a delicious meal, but it's gray and brown, it doesn't matter how delightful it might be once you put it in your mouth. But at first glance, you're like, I'm not so sure about that. And especially with control systems, is that that what's the adage? You eat with your eyes, and I truly believe that. And so our approach has always been from the human side, looking at elements and it comes from research. Who are you dealing with? What's the company? What are the color palettes that they already have established? All the things that are part of the user interface experience completely, in total, holistically dealing with it. And I had to get a West Coast, had to get the holistic thing in there, man. I can't have a show without one. But again, it's there has to be, and again, if you look at companies that are successful in tech, when they're reaching the end user, and keep in mind that that's what we're still dealing with, an end user, whether we're in a boardroom, in a classroom, or in a residence, it's still an end user that you're interacting with, somebody who may or may not be comfortable with technology, and the only comfort level that they have with it is probably the smart device that they're having in their hand or their computer in front of them. And they've kind of established the rules, so they've been trained a little bit in terms of what to expect, and in terms of colors and buttons and look. You can take a look at when there was a huge uproar and Apple switched over from their skeuomorphic design to now this new flat design, and everybody went, oh my gosh, we can't believe it. Take a look at every single app that's come out, in the past 3 months. Notice that they all completely changed their look. Why? Because rather than saying this is how we've always done it and our what we do at the core is great, they changed the skin because they wanted to make it, again, more comfortable. And that's really, I think, the kind of a lesson that we really need to look more closely at, which I don't think that we do more often than not, which is look at the user, look at what's around, and then yes, you're going to tailor it. A boardroom's different than a classroom, and a outdoor, patio is going to be different than either of those two. But at the end, you're still dealing with individuals who already have a perception of how they're dealing with their systems. And so, for me, again, I like I said, probably the best approach that we take is we take it completely away from, everything that's underneath, the nuts and bolts. That's what we're paid for. That's why we're here. And then focus more on the what are you comfortable with? What have you seen before? What do you like? And it like you were just saying a little bit earlier when you asked, it starts with research. It starts with getting to know the client. And Steve, I know, is going to agree with me on that, is it's interviewing the client. And at that point, once you decide what needs have to be addressed, then it's a matter of tailoring it for them in a way that anybody can walk in and use it, or somebody who works at that company is going to be comfortable with it.
All right, so let's take that a step further. Rich does primarily residential, and Steve is more in the commercial education. Who are we talking to then? I mean, Steve, we'll start with you on this. Who are we talking to as the end user? Is it the purchasing agent? Is it the CEO, or is it someone in between, or is it a committee? As much as I hate suggesting that, because sometimes, too many, the old saying, too many cooks. But who is it that we're talking to?
Sure. Well, I'll start off just by saying first, there's always this debate as to which one's more complicated, commercial or residential. And one of the things that I start with is that the big difference is that commercial, you have to cater to the masses. We have to provide a solution that is going to be good for many different types of people that walk into a room, and really follows best practices and guidelines, and has a bit of a proven history. Whereas residential, if one person is paying for it, they get what they want. Typically, I'm sure you have to we have to guide them properly, but I think the rules are a little different. And to answer your question, I think that it needs to be a consensus, but it doesn't really always have to do with what the user thinks that they want, and that's one of the things that I try to always discuss. So in an ideal situation, it'd be great to sit at a table with a representative from a user group and a representative from a technology manager group from an institution, and be able to present with them what we think is a good solution. And usually we start with that as a basis, and then we work forward. And I think one of the angles that we have to take is, this is what we have done in the past that has been successful, and I think that usually is a good starting point for them, because a lot of times their experiences are going to be a lot more limited than what we encounter, and to follow along and just deliver what the user is asking for is not always what's best for them.
Well, that's true. And the one thing I'll say about what's more complicated, what's harder, I've seen Rich Fregosa's programs. I'll program a boardroom any day before I do a resident.
Me too.
Good
Without
Lord.
a doubt.
Yeah, that's the difficult part is the back end. So, all right, Rich. With the exception of the obvious answer of the homeowner, who are you talking to when it comes to the interface?
Homeowners obviously definitely part, but we like to interact with the design team whenever possible. Because again, it's and this, and again, I'm finding we do also do commercial, and primarily we're like executive boardroom, or we wind up being in not necessarily kind of the for the masses rooms. So we wind up being working from a residential side into a commercial application, but we found the similarities in that it's obviously the first thing is who's going to touch it, and then the second thing is, are we in balance with everything else? In residential, you're dealing with potentially an interior designer, you're dealing with potentially the architect, any variety of members of the design team. And so, like anything else, I mean, they painstakingly work towards making all of these elements come together. We try to bring that same unity in terms of our layouts. And in commercial, we just call it branding. When we're working for a company, they spend a whole lot of money and a whole lot of time with their marketing message and who they are as a company, down to the font that they use. Again, and if you think about it, again, these are things that, these are the details in terms of, if you have, and again, as the touch panel, and you walk into an executive boardroom and there's 24 seats on this $100,000 custom built conference table that they've made, and they've made this the ultimate home court advantage. You're the forward-facing part of that entire system. So that next part becomes, how are we bringing that brand and the message across as well? And so that's where we took our residential bent and looked at it from the commercial standpoint, which is, how are you spreading your message? Every single thing that you touch. And so it allows for different inroads. And again, commercial is different because you got a whole lot of people who are writing the spec. You may just be looking and filling a specification, so things are a whole lot more defined, and you can't necessarily color outside the lines. Resi is always much more, jazz based. I mean, we're in a riff and kind of go with it. But yeah, I mean, with Resi, I mean, you've got somebody who's signing the check, somebody who's going to live there, And so you're dealing with matters of personality, style, and taste, and then you're bridging everything together, which is a matter of, the overall look and feel of the house. I mean, if somebody you can tell has a very traditional interior and muted colors, we don't give them fuchsia green and blue and pink, even though that worked for the last one, or it wound through. But you also have to look and say, okay, wow, this client happens to be in their 60s or 70s, or older, and they may be colorblind, or they may have issues with reading, like myself. I'm at that point where I'm like in between, the focal point of my glasses. That is now, and I never thought to ask this 20 years ago when I was starting out, but one of the first questions, a couple of the first questions that I ask people now when I start out is, do you wear glasses, and are you left-handed or right-handed?
Wow.
Because that will determine just your muscle memory and how, left or right-handed, how you approach something. Because I'm left-handed, so I'm constantly having to do things in reverse, I find, so I have to switch things around. But I found that with a touch panel, again, it's on a wall. It's kind of like reading the book. You can't bring the wall closer to you. So we've discovered that, yeah, we actually have to take some of those things into account. Do we make it larger? Do we make it smaller? Do we increase the contrast? Do we mute it? How do all of these elements come together? And more than anything else, that's what we've found is the expertise that your company and Steve's company, as my company, do, is that we're developers at this point. We're not configuring something, the white, the green, or the red. Pick off the Chinese menu, and so I think that's where that element comes from, and the experience comes through. Companies who are experienced have thought about that, and they've thought about asking those questions before the project starts, before the contract is negotiated, before all of those things, because the running line we've always had with clients is, look, my job is to ask you the questions you do not know to ask. It's just that simple.
Yep.
You don't know what you don't know right now. My job is to guide you through that and to ask you these questions. Have you thought about this? And then at that point, once we educate you, you can either say, yeah, no, I'm not sure. Well, within that framework, you're golden. And that applies to any of the industries out there. Is that coming in as an expert and being allowed to be an expert, and that sometimes in in the commercial arena, being allowed to is sometimes the hardest part. But yeah, that's where we tend to push forward, which is you have someone who is an expert in the design elements and how to bring a home together. We are your technology expert. That's what we do. We advise on all the technology matters, and that comes down to asking the questions. So it's 101 in terms of just how to deliver any product. But I think that sometimes our industry, we get away from that. We forget the basics of the interaction, and delivering on that side.
Yeah.
In this, as you're talking about a lot of the aesthetics of it, do you also see the flow of the panels change a lot, and how much of that is an impact? Because that's one of the things that I think is the important part. We could always put a new skin on it. On the commercial side, it's the flow that we look at as being a critical part of it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, and again, that comes down to the room itself, but that even comes down to the UI and the form factor that you're using. Common areas are going to have a different size necessarily than a master bath. Well, that's no different than when you're in the conference room itself at the table, as opposed to an ante room off to the side, or something that if you got a large meeting area, and you've got a projector, and you may need something for the technician in the back of the room, as opposed to what you need up front for the presenter. So, it's always, a needs-based solution at that point. And I think that not only the skinning, but the size of the form factor, the comfort of it, and when you enter a room, well, sometimes the first thing that you got to do when you enter a room is you got to turn on the lights. Forget the audio, forget the projector, forget the video conferencing. You got to be able to see the thing first, and those are like what you were talking about, Steve, is the flow, which is, how is the space used? And then you work backwards from that. And sometimes, you don't know how the space is used. And again, that's where really the response is that's where experience comes in. We've done X amount of projects of this type, and 80% of them we found that people are this way, 15% this way, and then there's this 5% that use it this way. You don't know what you are yet. We're going to go ahead and provide a framework to allow you to be any of these. But I mean, it's still sales. It's a relational approach. And, I say the dreaded S word, but it really is. I mean, if you are going to be a good programming house, whatever that means to you, the sales component is really the relationship component. And you need to be able to sell through the relationship to be able to get them what they want, because that's the only way where you're going to earn the trust. You may be the most phenomenal coder on the planet, but if you can't engender trust, air quotes, you're likely not going to succeed, because they're never going to feel comfortable telling you what it is that they don't want. And then they just kind of figure, okay, this is what they're giving me. That's how it is. Because a lot of times with technology, that's what they're used to. They just have to kind of work with what they're given. And so, I think exactly what Steve was saying is that flow is an important part. And again, but that stems from the underlying part, which is then the foundation, which is you've built a relationship. You feel comfortable enough being able to say, let's talk about how this is used before you even talk about the first button that goes on there.
Yeah. Rich, you said something interesting that kind of leads into one of our other topics here is being allowed to be the expert. Steve, how do we get the industry and even other industries to accept the fact that, or at least our view that, quality control in programming is essential? Whether that's agreeing to this on the front end and like Rich said, having that conversation and understanding the use case before we ever put a button on, all the way down to punch listing and agreeing on a scope of work. How do we get the industry to understand that this is an important part of doing an exceptional experience?
Sure, it's been a career-long battle, I'll tell you that, and I think that we're always educating, and I think we've been helping ourselves quite a bit through podcasts, through content development, and so forth, and trying to educate. And I think that's the big, there's a lot that goes into programming a system that has nothing to do with writing code. Everything from being able to prove out that a design is going to work, to identifying that the right equipment is chosen for the application and that it can do what is intended. And I think we all have some type of an approach to doing some submittals, whether it's just sending screen captures or doing a demo or putting together a document that explains how the system is going to work. I think we all must take that upon ourselves to do, and some projects require it, but it's certainly a number one best practice, because you need something to fall back on to be able to say that this is what we said we were going to do, and this is hopefully what we delivered upon. But in terms of getting people, getting the audience and getting the users or the consumers to understand the expertise that we have, I think that we look at ourselves, and we need to get out and be a part of the industry and be within the community, working up the ladder, talking to consultants and building direct relationships with technology managers, and on a residential side, I'm sure that is with interior designers and architects and so forth, so that you become part of their design team, you become a resource to them, so that when they have a client, they view you as their subject matter expert who can come in and help bring something to the table that is not as much of a strength on their part, and so that's the approach that I'm advising, or that we've been practicing.
Rich, Steve mentioned the best practices and stuff when it comes to programming and whether it's from the touch panel angle or the back end with the code. What are best practices? Unfortunately, there's not, at least not that I'm aware of, one big giant book that says, do this. In sound, there's the Yamaha guide to mixing, right? For electrical engineering, there are a bunch of different books that we can point to. There's not one great big book that says these are best practices. It just depends on who teaches you, right? Who is your mentor for this? So, from your aspect, what should be every programming house and every programmer's list of things that they need to do with every system?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you remember Steve, is that Qualcomm made a push, was it 6 years ago, maybe a little bit more now, where the dashboard concept, and they were definitely focusing on trying to say, look, let's use the industry knowledge that we have to create some best practices in terms of layouts and where buttons should go, and how user operation and flow, and these are the things that should be expected. The issue we have, I mean, again, look right now at, and not going to point anybody out, but let's look at several of the automation companies that are out there that are putting their new configurable solutions, right? They all have different approaches on how they're doing it. Every single one of them. If you look at Company A, Company B, Company C, if you look at their dashboards and how they've decided to present the information from you, it's a little different, each one, in terms of how they lay everything out. The information is still all the same. You've still got music, TV, climate, lights, cameras. But if you look at how they all approach it, they all said, well, we're going to do it our way. In the industry right now, that's what we're seeing, is that, like, with the hardware manufacturers, they all could have kind of decided on some form of format to how their AV receivers would look. But yet, every single manufacturer said, well, that's our secret sauce. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us better. That's what allows us to do X, Y, and Z. I think that from a programming standpoint, the one universal rule that we have with any project that we do is this needs to be written so that I can come back 10 years later and know exactly what's going on. And a lot of times...
All right, I'm going to stop you with that, because you said that to me more than once. As you have been one of my mentors, you and Steve both. How the heck do you do that? I'm sorry, but there are some programs that I've written 3 or 4 years ago, and granted, this is before I started listening to you, but I have no freaking clue. I have to get out the drawings and stuff. How do you do that? How do you make sure that you can read your own programming several years later?
It takes a while to develop a style, but
computer science 101. I mean, that one is that you got to be able to read what you wrote, and you got to be willing that somebody can step in and read what you wrote. There's almost a show. Yeah, there's almost a show over that. I mean, I absolutely state with all the conviction is that I am a complete dictator when it comes to that. It is, because again, I've had to come back now on some projects close to 20 years after I wrote the original code. And if 44-year-old Rich could travel back in time to, see 24-year-old Rich, I'd start slapping myself around the head for the lessons that I wasn't following then. And again, especially with, as an example, and we offer, and we put the pressure on ourselves on this one, because we offer what we call a conditional lifetime warranty on all our programming. It's like, look, if I broke something and I don't find out about it until 5 years after, I'm going to go back and fix it because I broke it. It was never right to begin with in the first place. So we wind up putting the pressure on ourselves to say, well, we got to make it right the first time, and we need to be able to cover it. And every single programming suite that we have out there has the ability to annotate your project inside the project itself. It just takes time, and it takes a matter of going to instructions together, and again, it winds up being also a company best practice thing. I think that what you do for a 1 or 2 man shop is completely different than for a 20 man shop. You have to have the ability to put the documents together to scale. I mean, the good news, honestly, is that there's lots of software development tools out there that do it for you automatically. I mean, just revision software, software versioning allows you to do a lot of that these days. And these were tools that we didn't necessarily have a lot of years ago, but we borrow a lot from the existing tech industry that's out there. I mean, we've gotten to the point where I'm really tired of reinventing the wheel just because we're in the AV industry and not the IT industry or the tech industry. And so it's a matter of saying, look, they're doing it right. I mean, we're a decimal point correction in the greater tech sector. Yeah. So if they're doing it better, let's find ways that we can adapt what they do to our market instead of constantly, readjusting it and kind of baking the cake from scratch every single time. But in terms of best practices, I mean, obviously, document everything, keep it together, keep it in a place that you can actually just hand over the package, and every time you think that, oh, in a rush to get something done, we'll get back to that later, stop and do it now. That's the biggest one that we've come across, because it's always bitten us in the end. It's like, oh, we're rushed, we're on deadline, we've got all these things to go. We'll get back to it. You never do. Yeah. And at that point, you wind up creating, and again, if you're a third-party programming house, your money is made on delivering product, software, and then getting on to the next one and getting paid and getting on to the next one. You start building enough time bombs for yourself over time where you poorly document, you don't annotate your code correctly, you kind of do weird one-offs just for the heck of it. Your profitability on a project, because again, and again, one of the lessons I think I always kind of talk about this one is that your profitability on a job isn't the moment you get paid. It's over the life of the project. How many times do you have to go back? Because every single time you're going back, you are just hemorrhaging drop by drop that bit of profitability keeps your company going. And as you do it longer and longer, you have more projects in the pipeline. All of them are dripping all over the place. Sooner or later, it can get overwhelming to you. So, we stress, just focus on doing it right. It's not always easy, but take the time to do it.
Okay. All right. We're going to wrap up the show with this other little piece of hot news and stuff. At CEDIA 2014, all three of us were in attendance there. Crestron unveiled what Ping is, P-Y-N-G. It is a configuration piece from them. It's a piece of Ping hardware that interacts with an app that you get either on an iPhone or an iPad. I believe I don't think they have an Android app yet, do they?
Not yet. They will be coming out.
Yeah.
They're just focusing on this right now.
But it's configuration, right? It's an all-in-one configuration piece. And some of the consternation that came out of that was, it's the end of programmers as we know it. The end is nigh. Hang up your hats and go do something else. Become an accountant or something, you programmers. So, since us three are programmers, Steve, we'll kick this off with you. How much truth is that? I mean, is it the end of programmers as we know it? Or is this just another piece that Crestron has released that makes it easier for some folks to do certain types of projects?
I definitely can't take the sky is falling approach. Programmers are going to be around for a while, and I think that the proof in that is that we, of all the things that I said earlier, what expertise we bring to the table, and I think the most important part of that is being the one who kind of knows how everything goes together and how to find why something doesn't work. And that's what we see a lot. We're relied upon quite a bit for just plain troubleshooting and knowing the equipment and knowing devices, and there's more devices that are made by control manufacturers that aren't even control pieces. So all of those tend to fall under our umbrella. But the impact of Ping is, I think, a good one on some levels. I mean, it's making easier stuff easy, and that's not stuff as independent programmers that we've really encountered very often. I think for my experience has been that we focus more on the medium and large size projects, the more complex systems, and hopefully what this is doing is making it so that the novice programmers need to kind of raise their game because they're not going to be working on easier systems. But I wrote an article about it. One thing that I did like about Ping is the ability for the user to make easy little changes that are on their own, and that's something that we're starting to build into some commercial systems by coding it in and on a tech page and so forth, being able to label your own buttons and being able to show and hide things, and those are things that I think are some value adds that Ping kind of brings to light, and for us, one of the bigger complaints that happens a lot is, why do I have to pay a programmer to make this easy change? So that's kind of been the answer to that. And you know what? It's a win-win, because it looks good. We provided extra value. It can be a selling point, and we really don't want to be doing those easy changes either, because honestly, they take a lot of time. Anytime you have to go in and change and recompile and load and all that stuff, it takes a lot of time, and there's no two ways about it.
No, that's true. All right, Mr. Fregosa, you'll have the last word. Is ping the end of programming as we know it?
No, not yet.
Not, oh, geez. Why not yet?
And it was interesting. We had a conversation a little while ago. There was an article written in one of the industry magazines kind of about this. It's kind of this guy's falling. I was quoted in it, and I know it caused a little bit of consternation in the community over it.
I know what you're talking about.
I think what it does is that, more than anything else, it is going to force companies to more accurately describe themselves.
Okay.
Programming, what a lot of these systems were, like ping and all of these, is, you're right, it's not programming. It's configuration.
Yeah.
It's designed for that, for configurable solutions. Any of the other companies, I mean, again, Control4 launched Composer Express, and Savant's got their other version, and you've got bitwise controls and URC. I mean, you've got dozens and dozens, and that's not even counting Revolve and all of these other Kickstarter versions of configurable solutions that are out there. What it's going to do is, it's going to cause companies, I think, to better establish their identities as to what and who they really are. Programming as we've known it and as we've defined it will come under a different change. I think that programming may wind up being it's kind of configuring and putting some stuff together and making sure that turns on and off. Something that a junior tech or a novice, like Steve was saying, can come in and it can kind of get it done. I think what will happen is that we will see that companies who are third-party companies, again, who kind of we're talking to right now, are going to have to make the decision on, are you going to try to make a living on configuring, or are you going to try and become a true software developer? Are you going to start developing solutions that are unique, that set you apart and add value to the process itself? Because again, in Resi, it's great because it takes a lot of the headache out of just little things like, oh gosh, I wanted the dining room sconce at 24% instead of 29%. You don't need to call me for that. It takes away time that I could be spending, and budget that I could be using towards something far more special, far more useful, far more tailored for the situation. And so, what it's going to do is there's going to be a larger chasm between the two. Is that you have the entry side of the configurable stuff, and then you're going to have true software on the other side, and established companies who are saying, we're going to differentiate ourselves, and we're going to focus on providing unique and useful solutions, and focusing all of our resources on that, and marketing ourselves as such. And right now, we all kind of fall into this gray area of programming. So I would be happy to see the term go away, because it really doesn't explain who we are. And Steve's written on it several times. We do so much more than just sit at a laptop and type commands. I mean, that's just one of the tools in our tool belt. There's so much more, and I think it's a necessary shakeup, because again, I've said it over and over. Our industry as a whole has an identity crisis, and I think from the programming community, there's almost this self-loathing that comes at times, because they're like, I don't want to just be the programmer. Okay, well then, set yourself apart. Show why you're not.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my take.
All right, that's a good way to end it. So that's going to do it for this edition of State of Control. With us has been Steve Greenblatt, Chief Everything at Controls Concepts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And how can people get a hold of you or Control Concepts?
Our website is controlconcepts.net. It can be reached in social media at Steve Greenblatt on Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+, so forth, and also do a little bit of writing for Commercial Integrator, so check out a piece got published today, actually.
Very cool. What was it on?
Programming, of course. The evolving role of the programmer, actually.
Oh, very cool. Also with us is Rich Fregosa, fregosadesign.com. Where can people find you, sir?
You can find me on the interwebs at fregosadesign.com, on Twitter at rfregosa. You can see me occasionally on cepro.com. And obviously today on Uncle Richie's Fireside Chat. See, as I monopolized most of the screen time. But yeah, a couple of different places, and always happy to be here. And I guess potentially be part of the AVNation broadcast this week again. We'll
yes. See. Yeah, I have to wear a San Francisco Giants hat this Friday, so yeah.
An honorable man.
He's well, you know what? I own up to my bets in a case of. I think I'm gonna do Schlafly's actually. Schlafly's is a pretty good microbrew here in St. Louis. So
you'll look. My wife says you will look fantastic in black and
white. My wife does not, just for the record. All right.
Well, it is Halloween. So.
Yeah, it is Halloween.
Yes, it is Halloween.
That way.
Yeah, it is Halloween. So, I actually get to. My son and I have the last few years have teamed up, and whatever he is, I'll do with a complimentary character. Last year he was Darth Vader, so I was Obi-Wan Kenobi, and this year he wants to be a zombie, so I guess I'll be a zombie as well. So,
or you can be the brains that are eaten. So
there we go. Yeah, or we could do the whole Walking Dead thing. I could be a sheriff with the gun or something. So I don't know.
That'd work.
We'll see. We got a week and a half. All right, don't follow me. Go by the website if you would, please. Holy cow, do we have a lot of folks there now with the Red Band Collective, and we actually have a comic strip now. Again, not me, really cool guy. So, yeah, holy cow, this is turning out into something halfway cool. AVNation.tv, this program, and a host of others. We have 2 brand spanking new shows that debut this week. Tony Zotti's doing one over about AV networking called POE, and our old buddy Phil Cordell has his own show debuting this week. So check it out, avnation.tv, avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. This has been A State of Control.